The morning air was cool, carrying the scent of damp grass and the distant sweetness of jasmine. Jake sat on his back porch, sipping coffee, watching as his ducks waddled through the yard, their webbed feet slapping against the dewy ground. They were his pride, his tiny flock of feathered troublemakers, content in their world of mud puddles and lazy naps beneath the oak tree. It was peaceful until it wasn't. The sharp click of heels on pavement cut through the morning quiet like a blade. Jake knew that sound. It was the sound of trouble. Asterisk asterisk Jake. Asterisk asterisk. The shrill voice snapped through the air like a whip, sending his ducks into a flurry of startled quacks. He exhaled slowly, setting down his mug, already bracing himself as Karen, the self-appointed dictator of the neighborhood, stormed into his yard without so much as a knock. She stood before him, hands on her hips, her mouth curled in that signature look of manufactured outrage. In one hand she clutched an official-looking document, waving it like a flag of impending doom. "This," she announced, thrusting it toward him, "is your final warning." Jake took the paper but didn't look at it. He had a feeling he already knew what it said. Karen had been circling for weeks now, dropping complaints like a pigeon with a grudge. First she claimed the ducks were unsightly. Then they were a nuisance. When neither of those stuck, she landed on the ultimate HOA buzzword, unsanitary. He folded the paper without reading it, keeping his tone calm. "Morning to you too, Karen. Don't play games with me," she snapped, stepping closer. "You have 24 hours to put diapers on those things or you'll be fined. $100 a day until you comply." Jake blinked. "Diapers?" "Yes, diapers. For my ducks." "Exactly." There was a long, weighty pause. Somewhere in the yard, one of the ducks let out an indignant quack, as if even they were offended by the absurdity. Jake rubbed the bridge of his nose. "Karen," he said carefully, "they're ducks. They live outside. They don't need diapers." Karen scoffed, crossing her arms. "They're disgusting. Do you know what I saw this morning? Duck droppings. On my lawn." Jake fought the urge to laugh. "You live 3 houses down. And it's still my neighborhood. I will not tolerate farm animals ruining our community. This is a place of order, Jake, not some—" She gestured wildly at his yard, nose wrinkled in exaggerated disgust. "Barnyard free-for-all." His patience thinned. He sat up straighter, staring her down. "So let me get this straight. You want me to what? Track down my ducks every time they go, clean it up immediately, and wrap them in tiny fabric prisons to keep them from daring to be ducks?" "Precisely." He huffed a dry, humorless laugh. "That's insane." Karen's smirk widened, the kind of grin that made his stomach turn. "What's insane, Jake, is that you think you're above the rules. You signed an agreement when you moved in. You knew what you were getting into." He clenched his jaw. She wasn't wrong. He had signed the HOA contract, but nowhere in it did it mention duck diapers. She was twisting the rules, molding them to fit whatever ridiculous vision she had for the neighborhood. "I'm giving you until tomorrow," she continued, tilting her head in mock sympathy. "After that, the fines start. And if you refuse to comply, well," she let the threat linger, letting him fill in the blank himself. "Eviction. Legal action. HOA harassment until he broke. Asterisk asterisk." She was enjoying this. Jake exhaled through his nose, forcing himself to stay composed. "You really have nothing better to do, do you?" Karen's smile was all teeth. "Some battles just aren't worth fighting." She turned on her heel and strode off, leaving behind the scent of expensive perfume and manufactured authority. Jake stared at the fine notice in his hands. $100 a day. That was extortion. The next morning the official fine was taped to his door. And the day after that. And the day after that. By the end of the week the amount was climbing to an absurd level. Jake had tried appealing to the HOA board, but Karen ran the meetings like a tyrant. She twisted every argument in her favor, weaponized the vague wording of the regulations, and ensured that any dissenting voices were drowned out. Neighbors who once chatted with him on their morning walks now avoided eye contact, too scared to be caught on the wrong side of Karen's warpath. A few whispered apologies, but none dared stand up to her. Then came the noise complaint. Jake had just settled into his porch chair when a knock rattled his front door. He opened it to find a uniformed officer standing there, looking almost apologetic. "Sir, we got a report of a noise disturbance." Jake blinked. "Hey, what?" The officer glanced past him, eyes landing on the ducks lounging lazily in the grass. "You're, animals?" Jake couldn't help it, he laughed. "You're telling me someone called the police over ducks quacking?" The officer gave a helpless shrug. "I don't make the complaints. I just have to check them out." Jake's grip tightened on the doorframe. He didn't need to ask who had filed it. Karen was relentless, escalating every day, determined to force his hand. That was when something shifted inside him. This wasn't about ducks. It wasn't even about HOA rules. This was about power. Karen wanted to break him, to humiliate him into submission. But she had underestimated him. She wanted a war, fine. Jake wasn't just going to fight back. He was going to win. Jake clenched his jaw as he stared down at the bright yellow violation notice pinned to his front door. The paper flapped slightly in the breeze, taunting him with its bold red letters. HOA infraction. Immediate action required. His stomach churned with frustration. He already knew what it was about. Karen. His ducks had been living peacefully in his backyard for years, waddling happily around their enclosure, quacking contentedly in the morning sun. No one had ever complained. In fact, most of his neighbors loved them. Kids would giggle as the ducks splashed in the kiddie pool, and even old Mrs. Thompson next door would occasionally toss them some leftover bread. But then Karen had moved in. And everything changed. She wasn't just an HOA board member, she was the kind of person who thrived on control, who viewed neighborhood rules as a weapon rather than a guideline. From the moment she settled into her immaculately landscaped home, she made it her mission to purge the community of anything that didn't fit her rigid vision of perfection. And for some reason she had fixated on the ducks. Jake tore the notice from the door, his eyes scanning the absurd demand for the third time. Asterisk, all animals within HOA jurisdiction must adhere to community sanitation policies. Your waterfowl are in direct violation unless proper containment measures are enacted immediately. Failure to comply will result in daily fines. Asterisk. And then in bold. Asterisk, appropriate pet attire is required for sanitary purposes. In short, duck diapers are mandatory. Asterisk. Jake let out a bitter laugh. Duck diapers. Karen actually wanted him to put diapers on his ducks. He had tried reasoning with her before. When she first approached him with her plastic smile and clipped tone, she pretended it was just a polite request, that she was only looking out for the community standards. But the moment he pushed back, she revealed her true colors. Rules are rules, she had said with a smirk, waving a copy of the HOA bylaws like a sacred text. If you can't follow them, you might want to consider moving somewhere less structured. Jake had refused. And that was when the real battle began. The first complaint was about noise, excessive quacking disrupting the peace. The second was about odor, even though Jake meticulously cleaned the ducks area every day. Then came the fines, escalating in price, stacking up like a financial chokehold. Karen was playing dirty and she expected him to bend under the pressure. But she had underestimated him. Jake stormed inside, tossing the violation notice onto his cluttered kitchen table. He needed a plan, something Karen wouldn't see coming. Ignoring the fines wasn't an option. He had seen what happened to others who crossed Karen. The retired couple down the street had gotten a lien on their home because of unpaid HOA fees. The single mom 2 blocks over had been threatened with eviction over an unauthorized garden gnome. Karen didn't stop until she got what she wanted. But she also had a weakness. Jake had been watching, waiting, learning her patterns. Karen didn't just love power, she needed people to fear her. She thrived on control, on the idea that she was untouchable. That was her blind spot. And Jake was going to exploit it. The first step was compliance, but on his terms. The next morning, just as the sun began peeking over the rooftops, he stepped outside with a grin plastered across his face. Karen was already out, sipping coffee on her front porch, watching him like she always did. Perfect. Jake walked toward his backyard, making sure to pause dramatically near the fence that separated their properties. Then, with a flourish, he held up a tiny, ridiculous, bright pink duck diaper. Karen's eyes narrowed. Jake took his time fastening the diaper onto his most dramatic duck, Daisy, who let out an indignant quack. He made a show of it, adjusting the straps, nodding in approval. Then he did it again. And again. Until every single duck in his yard was waddling around in absurd, neon-colored diapers. By the time he was done, a small crowd had gathered, neighbors drawn in by the spectacle ***. Even the usually aloof Mr. Patterson had his phone out, snapping pictures of the diapered ducks with barely concealed amusement. Karen's smug expression cracked. "This isn't a joke," she snapped, marching toward the fence. Jake shrugged. "I'm just following the rules. Exactly as written." The murmurs from the watching neighbors grew louder, some snickering, others shaking their heads in disbelief. Karen's grip on control was slipping and she knew it. She started, but Jake cut her off. "Oh, and Karen? Since you're so concerned about cleanliness, I went ahead and submitted an official sanitation request for community review. Her eyes widened. Jake had spent the night combing through the HOA bylaws. If Karen wanted to enforce ridiculous rules, she had to follow them too. And according to Section 14B, any property complaints involving animal waste required a full investigation of all homes within a 500-foot radius, including hers. Which meant her perfectly manicured yard and pristine porch would be scrutinized just as closely as his ducks. Karen's lips thinned. She turned on her heel, her entire body rigid, and stormed back into her house without another word. Jake exhaled, watching as the small crowd slowly dispersed, a few neighbors giving him knowing nods before heading off. He had won this round. But he knew Karen wouldn't go down that easily. The real war was just beginning. Jake watched from his porch as Karen strutted down the sidewalk, her phone pressed tightly to her ear, her expression one of barely contained irritation. She didn't know it yet, but the ground beneath her was shifting. The war she had started was about to take a turn, and this time he would be the one calling the shots. He had spent the past few days waiting, letting Karen believe she had won. The fines kept piling up, the HOA board continued to ignore his appeals, and his neighbors remained too intimidated to challenge her. But none of that mattered now. The real game was just beginning. That morning, he had gone out of his way to make sure Karen saw him in his yard, casually tossing feed to the ducks, his expression neutral. No anger, no resistance. Just acceptance. She had smirked as she passed, clearly reveling in his supposed defeat. Jake had to fight the urge to laugh. She had no idea. The first phase of his plan had been simple: gather intelligence. He had spent nights combing through every HOA rule, every bylaw, every obscure guideline buried in the fine print. Karen had been so focused on enforcing ridiculous policies that she hadn't considered how fragile her own position was. And now he knew exactly where to hit her. The second phase? Set the trap. Late that night, while the neighborhood was silent and the streetlights buzzed faintly in the distance, Jake quietly led his ducks across the sidewalk, a trail of breadcrumbs in his wake. They waddled obediently, pecking at the food, right up to Karen's pristine, overly decorated front porch. He had watched enough of her daily routine to know she wouldn't step outside until morning. That gave him plenty of time. The ducks took their time milling around, leaving little surprises on her expensive welcome mat, the edges of her flower beds, and most importantly, right in front of the security camera she had installed to catch him breaking HOA rules. By the time they were done, he ushered them back into his yard and disappeared inside, setting his alarm for just before dawn. The next morning the show began. Karen's shriek was loud enough to send birds scattering from the trees. Jake stepped onto his porch just in time to watch her lose her mind. She stood at the top of her porch steps, hands gripping the sides of her head like she had just witnessed a crime scene. Her perfect lawn? Tarnished. Her spotless welcome mat? Defiled. And the best part? Her security camera, which she had so proudly used as evidence against him before, had captured the entire thing. *** clear footage of ducks vandalizing her precious porch ***. Jake casually strolled over, coffee in hand, forcing himself to keep his expression neutral. "Morning, Karen," he said, taking a slow sip. "Something wrong?" Karen whirled on him, face red, eyes wide. ***, this is your fault, ***. He raised an eyebrow. "My fault?" "Oh no, Karen, this looks like an unsanitary pet problem." Her mouth opened and closed, searching for a retort, but Jake had already laid his next move. "Good thing you have that security camera," he continued, nodding toward the blinking red light on her porch. "That'll help the HOA see exactly what happened." Karen froze, realization dawning in her eyes. She had no proof that Jake had done anything. Just that ducks had done it. Her own evidence, her own obsession with catching him, had just turned against her. Jake took another sip of coffee. "Of course, I'm sure the HOA would love to see this. You know, considering how strict they are about cleanliness violations." Her face drained of color. Jake had already checked the rules. There were penalties for unsanitary conditions on private property. Penalties that could double if not addressed. Karen knew this. She turned abruptly, pulling out her phone, no doubt preparing to call someone, to threaten, to manipulate, to find a way out. But there wasn't one. Not this time. Jake let the silence hang before delivering the final blow. "Oh, and Karen?" She hesitated, fingers hovering over her phone screen. "I filed an official complaint about your front yard." Her head snapped up. Unsanitary conditions. He let the words settle, watching as her fury turned into something else. Panic. Karen had spent weeks harassing him, weaponizing HOA rules, bending regulations to fit her agenda. But now she was on the receiving end. She knew it, and so did he. Karen's face was a storm of emotions: rage, disbelief, panic. For the first time since this battle had begun, she wasn't in control. Her fingers clenched around her phone, her knuckles white as she processed what had just happened. Jake stood there, calm, sipping his coffee, watching the cracks form in her carefully curated mask. He could almost hear the gears in her head grinding, desperately searching for an escape route. You think this is funny?" she hissed, her voice trembling with barely contained fury. Jake tilted his head, feigning innocence. "I think it's ironic." Karen's nostrils flared. She glanced down at her ruined porch, her jaw tightening as she shifted her weight from foot to foot. She was cornered and she knew it. If she argued, she'd only draw more attention. If she called for backup, well, the HOA had rules and this time they weren't in her favor. She took a sharp breath. "This isn't over," she spat, turning on her heel, her movements stiff with frustration. She stormed inside, slamming the door behind her so hard that her decorative wreath nearly fell off its hook. Jake exhaled slowly, letting a smirk creep onto his face. Oh, it was over. She just hadn't realized it yet. The real fun was about to begin. Karen's downfall didn't happen all at once. It happened in small, devastating blows, each one knocking her pedestal a little lower, each one making her world a little smaller. First, the HOA investigated her. Jake had made sure of that. He had sent in formal complaints, complete with timestamps, images, and video evidence. Karen's once pristine record was stained overnight. The same board members who had so eagerly dismissed his pleas were now forced to acknowledge her violations. Then came the whispers. The same neighbors who once feared Karen began talking behind her back, delighting in the irony of it all. Karen, the queen of order, caught violating her own rules? It was too good. Some neighbors were passive about it, merely chuckling as they walked by, but others? They reveled in her misery. By the end of the week, Karen's yard was under scrutiny. The HOA ordered her to clean up the mess immediately. A direct violation was a finable offense, and non-compliance could lead to further penalties. Jake watched from his porch, arms crossed, as Karen begrudgingly scrubbed her own porch clean. Her expression was murderous, her movements jerky with frustration. Every so often she'd pause, throw a glare in his direction, and then go back to scrubbing, like a villain forced to serve a sentence for their own crimes. But the final blow? It came from the very people she had ruled over for years. One by one, Jake's neighbors, emboldened by Karen's humiliation, started filing their own complaints. All the petty grievances she had ignored, siding that needed repainting, fences that were a few inches too tall, decorations that violated community aesthetic rules, ***, were suddenly weaponized against her. The same system she had used to control everyone else had turned against her. By the end of the month, Karen was drowning in fines. Jake could tell it was breaking her. The way she avoided eye contact, the way she no longer strutted around the neighborhood like she owned it, the way her once perfectly curated image had crumbled. Then one morning as Jake was tending to his ducks, he saw something that nearly made him drop his feed bucket. A moving truck. Karen's house was being emptied out. Jake leaned against his fence, watching as workers carried out boxes, Karen standing stiffly on her porch, barking out instructions. Her face was pale, her jaw set in a permanent clench. She looked exhausted, drained, defeated. Jake let out a low whistle. "Didn't think you'd be moving so soon," he called out casually. Karen didn't respond immediately. She stood there, gripping a box so tightly it looked like she might crush it. Then, after a long moment, she turned to him. And for the first time since this war had begun, she looked small. Not powerful. Not terrifying. Just small. She licked her lips as if trying to find the right words, but in the end she just exhaled sharply, shook her head and climbed into her car. No threats. No parting words. Just silence. The moment she drove off, the tension that had strangled the neighborhood for years seemed to dissolve. Neighbors smiled again. Conversations resumed. The fear of fines, of ridiculous rules, of constant surveillance, it all disappeared. Jake sat back in his chair, watching as his ducks waddled through the yard, free as ever. For the first time in weeks, he let out a deep, satisfied sigh. Victory had never felt so good.